and we worry so much about what's going to happen in the next 6 months or couple years. We don't
I
think
see.
about how we're investing for the next 20 years or 30 years.
Have you ever felt like someone else understands money better than you do? It's a feeling our financial planners hear all the time, especially from women, even when they're already managing many of the financial decisions that keep a household running. So, where does that financial confidence gap come from? Today, we'll explore why so many women underestimate their own financial know how and why they may know far more than they realize. Hello, and welcome to Money on Your Mind from Edelman Financial Engines. I'm Michael Liersch, a behavioral scientist, financial planner, and your chief planning officer at EFE. Thanks for joining us for a conversation about how people are feeling about money, what they're wrestling with, and how financial planning can help you straighten things out. Today, we're talking with Ashley Decker, an EFE financial planner. Ashley, welcome to Money on Your Mind.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So, Ashley, we've spent a little time together talking about your journey, professional journey, your passion for clients. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us, especially in this context of women, financial planning, investing? Would love to hear more about it.
Sure, absolutely. So I have a kind of a unique path, I think, to getting to the point of being a financial planner. So I am actually a pharmacist by background. I graduated from the University of Kansas with my PharmD.
Nice.
I never worked as a retail pharmacist. I wanted to work in kind of a branding role. So I moved out to the New York, New Jersey area and worked with Big Pharma. They're all pretty much out there, right? And it
Yeah.
was a marketing, branding, sales type role. So we actually created the brand name of drugs, which was very interesting. My goal to go into healthcare was really to help people. And I felt like in each individual project, I got to kind of work with clients. Projects over, go to another, project, meet new clients. And I wasn't really working directly with, patients or clients and helping them as much as I wanted to. So I did a little bit of soul searching and thought, how can I work with people and kind of help them in a better capacity than what I'm doing? I had kind of a personal relationship kind of situation where I noticed with my parents and a financial planner that they had. She made a big difference in their life, and I realized that I wanted to do that as well.
Wow, I love that. So a personal situation where a planner helped, and you wanted to do more of that. So tell us about your particular passions in working with your clients. So, where does that come out, especially from a women or female standpoint?
Absolutely. Well, I just want to make sure that women are educated. They understand. I mean, everyone, right? But make sure that they're educated. They understand what's going on. And I feel like a lot of people just don't know what they don't know, or they feel like they need a little bit of help, advice, or guidance. And that's just really a lot of what I do.
So let's get into the topic at hand, and I love this angle, which is data driven, where we see, especially in the United States, actual underconfidence in women and overconfidence in men when it comes to their financial acumen, know how. And by underconfidence, let's define it a little bit, Ashley, here, because I'm a dorky behavioral scientist. So, what that means is there's actually a technical level of knowledge, and women tend to say, subjectively, that they know less than they actually technically do, whereas men have a technical level of knowledge and they tend to say they know more than they actually do, technically speaking, subjectively. So, what's interesting about that is, why that happens. Is that something that we're raising people to feel like? Is it reinforced by social media? What are the dynamics there? And of course, we're also just talking in averages, right,
Sure.
Ashley? So that doesn't represent all men and women and how they think and feel about their level of knowledge with respect to finances. So there's a lot of interesting complexities to this topic. But what do you think is at the core of underconfidence in women, at least as you see it in your planning experiences? Like, what's the driving force behind that?
I think that women are generally more conservative as investors. They're bigger savers. They oftentimes will know more about the budget or the day to day spending in the household, but then feel like they don't understand the stock market or they don't understand what this asset class is and what all these things mean. And so I hear a lot of comments of, I don't understand, or I'm not good at this, or, talk to my husband about that because I don't understand, which always, kind of bothered me a little bit being, a millennial, independent woman, right? I'm like, we need to have a basic understanding of our finances, right? So I don't know if that's an internal thing. It's a generational thing. I think it's shifting a little bit, but I just think it's a conservative, and like you had mentioned, just feeling like maybe we don't know as much as we actually really do.
So how do you then, in a very non-judgmental way, open the door or the frame to, that person really, understanding, having that, meta level of awareness of what they actually know and they don't know?
When I'm talking to people is just education. I think that would be probably the main kind of feedback that I get. It's just I understand this better than I ever, thought I would, or you've explained things very clearly, and now I feel more comfortable. So I just kind of make sure that I'm trying to explain what's happening, how things work, at least at a basic level, and I'll usually get to the point in the conversation where things start shifting, and a lot of times the women will start leading the meeting or asking the questions. I think maybe they just feel more comfortable to start asking questions. And once they do, they understand and realize they know far more than they thought. And they understand, what's going on and feel more confident.
What are two or three of those questions that remained unasked that you open the door to being asked that really gets things going? Can you give us a few examples of what that sounds like?
I would say so. A lot of people just say, I don't understand this stuff at all, right? I don't understand, the stock market or what's going on. And so we'll just have a really basic conversation on, risk tolerance, kind of what's going on with the market, different asset classes, meaning, types of companies, right, and sizes. And so I might be biased on this, but I think that women sometimes just kind of feel like they're not comfortable asking the question, or they don't want to sound, stupid or something. And so once you make them feel comfortable, then they're open and we're able to have a good dialogue.
So, Ashley, it's interesting that you're talking about this idea of kind of getting beyond, fears of asking questions, looking like you don't know what you're doing or talking about. So, when it comes to that, I think there's a lot of lingo in finance, and once you get past the lingo, you realize, oh, that wasn't really that complicated. Like risk tolerance, well, what is that? That's just like, what's my willingness level to take on risk? Okay, well, that made more sense than calling it risk tolerance.
Sure.
Do you have another example that you use in these conversations where there's like a piece of lingo that you just kind of cut through the noise on by just explaining it plainly, and then it increases that confidence level of the person you're talking to?
Sure. Well, I'd say so. So, like you said, risk tolerance is a big one. Usually, what I just explain to people in its most basic sense, it's just the percentage of stocks versus bonds, right? So, kind of understanding the allocation model, what percentage you have in equities versus bonds, and then a lot of times, if we just look at it on a scale, right, of 1 to 10, where do you fall? Are you in the middle? Are you high? Are you low? And then that tells us what amount of risk you want to take, and we can determine what percentage of stocks and bonds you should have in your portfolio.
I mean, like right there, you just broke it down, right? It's like this mysterious term, and you're like, oh, wait, it's just what's driving, the proportion of what I would invest in terms of stocks versus bonds. That's so awesome because I think to myself, we've all been there, right, Ashley? At some point, you were a pharmacist. I had I was a professor before this. We didn't necessarily know all the lingo and how to translate it. And getting on to the other side of that can really open the door to really thinking to yourself, "Oh, I can do this. I can know this." And asking the question is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. So when we think about your top items, when you think about women, engaging in financial matters, what's the number one motive for you really wanting women to lean in and understand the planning and investment process?
Yeah, so I mean, from from a very personal perspective, when I first started working in the industry, we would call kind of I'd call clients that might have a life insurance policy or an IRA or something, and I'd call women, and they'd say, you need to speak to my husband. I don't know anything about that, which I had a hard time with. And then I had a few clients that really early on, unfortunately their husband passed away a lot sooner than they anticipated they would. They didn't really understand finances a whole lot at all, and so while they're struggling with their death, they're struggling with education, understanding what's going on, where everything is. And then we had to do financial planning, right? And so I've certainly had some moments where women have given me a hug and told me they cannot believe that, they understand it as well as they do and they feel so much better. That's meant so much to me that I really want to try to stress for people in general, but women absolutely, to try to make sure that you have a basic understanding of your finances and what's going on. Don't just trust another person, but feel confident that you either have a resource to go to where you can have that help, or you can kind of rely on yourself to know that you know more than you think you know, and that's just really important to me.
So actually, on the podcast, a lot of people like hearing real stories, and this is feedback we've been getting. And so when it comes to, this narrative about how important it is and your passion for women being very engaged, even if it's uncomfortable, digging into it, asking questions, really revealing the level of knowledge, that's there. Um, I know you've done this so many times in meeting after meeting, but is there a circumstance or story that you want to share with our listeners that comes to your mind where, the critical nature of this really made itself clear to you? Can you share that with us?
Sure. No, absolutely. And I think this happens, more often than people think. But one kind of example that comes into my mind is I had a lady that came in. Her husband was like early 60s. They had not planned for retirement yet, which is a little, on the late side, but that was something they were going to do and they were going to do together. Unfortunately, he passed really suddenly and unexpected. And so as we were kind of talking and working together, she didn't understand finances. So we had to go through that. We had to kind of combine everything together and then build out a retirement plan for her. She had no idea if they had enough money, if they'd be able to retire, if she'd be able to retire now, or if this really impacted, her life significantly. So we worked together. She was able to retire. And one thing that really sticks out in my mind is that she had given me a hug and told me that it was one of the only good things that had come out of her husband's death, right? So you never think it's going to happen to you, but it certainly can. And I think it's really important to be prepared and have someone in your corner that can help you with these things.
Wow, that is really, there's an intensity to that, but to your point, it's actually not as unusual or uncommon as we all think. And it's just wonderful you were able to help that human being. I know that links to some of the personal things that you shared with us on planners, helping your own family. And I just want to reiterate for our listeners and our viewers that, to your point, it can be too late to plan and invest. And so really getting ahead of that, and then also getting ahead of things that we don't expect to happen, but that can happen, is also very valuable. So I appreciate you sharing that story, Ashley, because for those who may be not as motivated as they could be, to get started, because nothing like that has happened, it's really important. And you also highlight that it usually causes, in order to make progress, it really is oftentimes a life event that causes that action. And so hopefully that story that you just shared really motivates someone where something bad hasn't happened yet to actually do the work. What's your view on, and before we leave that particular topic, what's your view on this idea of trying to motivate yourself to know more about money and finances? Would you say go to the internet, go to a professional? Like, where's a good place to start to get yourself sort of going and more confident and comfortable on the topic?
Yeah. So I would say I mean, people don't necessarily like to read books and have education, right, and kind of force themselves to do it. So I would say that any way that you enjoy learning about the topic, I think, is the most important piece. So whether it's podcasts or you're using, again, podcasts or social media or just videos or reading, or, books on tape or whatever, is if it's something that you enjoy doing, I think you're much more likely to get involved. It doesn't have to be sitting in front of the computer and trying to read the Wall Street Journal, right? So,
I love that. And it could even be a conversation.
yeah.
So we have some data that say younger people actually like talking about money in
Yeah.
social settings more than their older counterparts are comfortable with. So I love all those ideas. So what are the types of things that you would just highlight for women they should be particularly focused on and their male counterparts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say longevity is a big one, right? Women tend to live longer, so we need to make our money last a little longer. The other one is men or women sometimes make less money, right? But the other one is really that women oftentimes are more conservative investors, even in the long term for retirement. They might be on the more conservative side, which also results in having less money saved for retirement, right? So I know that that's a major factor in kind of affecting women, whether they're married or single. They often have less retirement assets for saving and because of the way that they invest the money.
So let's move into then. This is a great bridge to mistakes clients are making. So this is actually everyone's favorite part of the podcast, and I
Yeah.
always say that, but it's just factual. We get a lot of feedback on this.
Yeah.
So in this context or construct of women investing, planning, what is the biggest mistake you see female clients make right now? What are you seeing?
Female and just everyone, I think in general, thinks in the short term and holds on to a little bit too much cash or emergency savings than they really need, and kind of forget about the long term growth that we're working towards.
Maybe for our listeners and viewers, what is when you see that mistake, like what's driving that overly like that over or that high index on cash? What do you think that is?
So it is important to have emergency savings, right? That's a very important piece. I just think that people kind of overestimate what they could possibly need to have as emergency savings, right? And might have multiple years worth. So I think that's part of it. I think being conservative is part of it. And then sometimes we're just living in the here and now, and we pay attention to the news and we pay attention to politics, and we worry so much about what's going to happen in the next 6 months or couple years. We don't
I
think
see.
about how we're investing for the next 20 years or 30 years.
How about our last question, which is, what's one thing everyone and I know we're focused on women and planning and investing, but so it could be focused on that environment or people writ large. But what's one thing you think everyone should be doing right now when it comes to planning and investing in their money?
I mean, I think even if we just have a little bit to save, I know with inflation and everything else, money is tight, but just getting started with savings is very important.
And what do you think's causing the inertia right now from getting started? Do you think it's the, underconfidence? Do you think it's the noise out in the environment? What's driving the inertia? Just so people can hear you say it and maybe say, "Oh, that is me, and I need to get past that."
So many things and so many reasons, but I would say if I'm running into younger people or just people that haven't gotten started yet, a lot of times they just don't even know where to start or what to do.
Any last words here for us?
No, I think that's it. I really appreciate you having me on today, and I really enjoyed, talking about women and money.
All right. Well, we're lucky to have you here. And that's everything we have for today. This has been Money on Your Mind. A big thanks to financial planner Ashley Decker for joining me. And we'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. I'm Michael Liersch from Edelman Financial Engines. Talk to you next time.